I'd like to talk with you about electrostim machines. Electroacupuncture is a commonly used form of acupuncture to insert acupuncture needles and then to apply a mild electric current to it. The principles and the way to use electrostimulation is covered in other areas in this course, and I'd just like to show you some of the machines and some of the features that we'll find that are most common on these electroacupuncture machines. I have a few here in front of me to show you right now. The three machines that I have here in front of me are the eStim 2, the Ito ES130, and the Pointer XL2. These two machines are used in conjunction with acupuncture needles. They can also be used non-invasively by attaching them to pads on the skin, but they are intended to be used with acupuncture needles. The Pointer XL2, however, is intended to be used as a non-invasive electrostim machine, and we will go over that one as well. But first, let's take a look at these two, and we'll begin with the ES130. Now, the features of this machine, first of all, it has three channels, channel 1, channel 2, and channel 3, which are also labeled up here, channel 1, 2, and 3. And there are three inputs for the leads. These inputs are proprietary inputs, so they will only take the leads that are sold with the unit. Other electroacupuncture units oftentimes have a more conventional input like this 1/8 inch jack that we would see used on the eStim 2. Once these leads are in, we're going to want to stimulate an acupuncture point or a pair of acupuncture points with these leads. And we use these alligator clips that are on the end to connect directly to the acupuncture points. So an alligator clip can be clipped onto a metal-handled needle like so, or it can be clipped onto a plastic-handled needle like this. Now, when you're clipping onto the shaft of a needle, while it may or may not be strictly in compliance with clean needle technique, what we want to watch out for is this situation. As you can see, it looks like I'm clipped on, but I'm actually not. There's not really a close connection here. So one would want to make sure that you grab this at a slight angle so that when you do grab a hold of it, you've really got a solid connection. Solid connection either to the handle or to the shaft of the needle. Clipping to the shaft of the needle, again, is also generally a little bit more comfortable for the patient, as when you clip to the handle, oftentimes it will pull the needle a little bit and it might be uncomfortable for the patient. So you might keep that in mind. So let's take a look now at this machine and see some of the other features here. Some standard features that we'll find on most acupuncture machines are the indicator light. If I turn one of these channels on so that we begin the flow of energy into one of these channels, and here we are into channel 1, you'll see that this green light starts to flash. It usually takes a second or two before they start to flash. And you can see this is flashing at about 1 cycle per second. 1 cycle per second is what I have the machine set for. There are 2 settings for frequency, and there's a little table here to help keep you abreast of exactly what you've got set on your frequency. So we have a setting, a little knob here where it's labeled frequency that will set either slow, 1, 2, 3, 4. There's just numbers up to, I think, 8 or 10. As you can see, as I increase the number here, now I'm at 8, now I'm at 6, now I'm at 4, the frequency of our green light slows down or speeds up based on how I'm setting that frequency. If I set the frequency back to that original 1 cycle per second, I can also modulate the frequency with this frequency multiplier. If I move from low to medium, we move from 1 cycle per second to 20 cycles per second. And if I move it up to high, we're going to move to 150 cycles per second. At 150 cycles per second, you can, it just looks like a straight, bright green glowing light. And in fact, even at 20 cycles per second, it almost looks like a solid light. We can certainly see the fluctuations, but once we get much past 20 or 30 cycles per second, we get a very different reaction. At a low frequency, 1 cycle per second, for instance, or 2 cycles per second, or 5 cycles per second, something in this range, we get individual muscle contractions each time an electrical stimulation is sent to the acupuncture points. If we increase this to where this light is glowing green, then we get a tetanic contraction of the muscles. So we get different results. This mostly covers the frequency. This covers the channels. As we increase the number here on the sides, we have these wheels here which are easily adjusted. We can adjust the amount of energy going to each one of these channels, channel 1, 2, and 3. And we get a fairly good separation in terms of insulation between channels, so that when we're adjusting one channel, we generally are not affecting the other one very much. Although sometimes we might affect one channel. We might get a little bleed over from one to another, depending upon the machine that you have. I've had one of these for many years, and I see no bleed over effect, although with some other machines, sometimes there's a little bleed over. So always be cautious about that. There is one other adjustment on this particular machine, and that's a high-low adjustment, which is on the back of the machine, low and high. And this is, again, an intensity multiplier. Just as this is a frequency multiplier, this is an intensity multiplier, and generally it's left set to low unless you're going to use transcutaneous nerve stimulation with pads like those that would be used with a TENS unit. And instead of putting the leads to a needle, we'd be using them to a pad, in which case we're going to need a higher intensity than the machine will put out when set for needles. So there is an additional setting there so that this can be used as a TENS unit as well. Now let's take a look at the eStim2. The eStim2 is very similar to the Ito ES130, but it has some differences as well. It has some extra features, and it's missing some features as well. First of all, the most obvious feature is that it only has 2 channels. So rather than being able to treat 6 points at the same time, we can treat 4 points or 2 channels with the eStim2. It has an intensity adjustment for each channel, channel 2 and for channel 1. This one does have separate lights, so you can make sure that you can see which channels are turned on, which is a nice feature. And we can see the frequency modulator here. We don't have any frequency multiplier, nor do we have any intensity multiplier, so it's a much simpler machine. And the frequency can just be set according to this dial. So right now it's set for 2 cycles per second, 10 cycles per second, 20, 30, 50, 80, and finally 100. Those are the settings that are available. While it certainly doesn't have the range of settings that we can find on the Ito, it can easily be argued that we don't need quite that range of settings, that if we have a low frequency setting and a high frequency setting, that may very well be just all that we need in an electroacupuncture machine. Now this also has one other switch up here, which you may have noticed, which says milli and micro, or milliamp and microamps. We can switch this machine between milliamps and microamps. Generally, electrostimulation, electroacupuncture is considered to be milliamp stimulation. However, there is more and more research being done into microamp stimulation, and if you choose to use microamp stimulation in your practice, then this machine will fit the bill for both types of stimulation. This is the Pointer XL2 electrostimulator, and it's different from the eStim2 or the ES130 that we just looked at, in that this is made for non-invasive stimulation of acupuncture points. It's made to be used without using needles in the skin. So this directly stimulates through the skin. This is a transcutaneous nerve stimulation device. It also will locate acupuncture points. It defaults to location. When we push this button, it will then stimulate with a small electrical charge through the tip. Now, just like we saw with the Electro stim machines, and we needed 2 needles in order to complete that circuit. We needed 2 leads to complete that circuit. We still need to complete the circuit in order to locate or to stimulate points. The the Pointer XL2 locates points by detecting lowered electrical resistance on the skin, and therefore we will need a circuit for that to happen. Now, the way this is designed, it's designed to be worked by a right-handed practitioner who would put their thumb over this particular plate here. So your thumb would catch this plate, and then your hand goes on the patient, so you're touching some part of their skin, and you have now made a connection. Once this touches the patient, we will see some evidence of that. And let me show you, I can demonstrate on my own arm easily enough for you. I'll take a look at large intestine meridian. So I'm going to turn the intensity on, and I'm going to turn it right up because I know this machine doesn't stimulate me too strongly. I can tolerate the electrical stimulation quite easily. I'm going to set the cycles per second for the stimulation to, I'll set it right down near 1 cycle per second. And I'm going to increase the sensitivity. Now, the sensitivity is a dial that tells us how sensitive it is going to be in the location phase. In order to make this location and stimulation work, let's just take a look at my large intestine channel. I'm going to make the contact here. I'm going to place this along the skin, and we see this light starting to light up as soon as I touch the skin. That tells me that my sensitivity is a little bit too high because it's saying everything here is an acupuncture point. I'm going to adjust the sensitivity down a little bit, and we'll see what happens. Still there, maybe a little less. When we approach large intestine 5, we see a pretty solid green light. We hear that sound fairly clearly. Large intestine 4. Right there, that looks pretty good. This is not personally my favorite way to locate acupuncture points, but many people do find that it's very helpful and a very useful tool for locating acupuncture points. But for stimulating them, it's fairly effective. I'm going to stimulate large intestine 4. And we can't quite, let's see if I can get my hand into a position so you can see that stimulation. Well, I don't think you can see it, but there is a 1 second flash of electricity that's coming into my hand, and I can feel that little bit of a shock going out to the tips of my finger. Sometimes you can see a little twitch in the muscle when you've got it just right. Another way that we can ground this, because this needs to be grounded, again, this is the grounding plate, and we touch, if I touch here, I need to touch the grounding plate in order for that to work. There is also a bit more of an effective grounding situation. We can use this grounding pole, which can be plugged in here, which will now override the grounding plate. And the patient can hold this in their hand. And perhaps with this grounding plate, we may see a little bit more evidence of the electricity. When it hits, I might get a slightly better connection. So let's see what happens. So if I place this on large intestine 4 now, I think you can see that. You can see my finger moving with each beat of the green light there. You see that? Is the green light flashing and my finger is moving? You can see those muscle stimulation that's happening. So this is a very effective tool for stimulating acupuncture points and arguably a good tool for finding acupuncture points as well. All right, so we've looked at 3 electroacupuncture machines. They, I think, are fairly representative of most of the machines that you'll find on the market today. And let's move on to our next topic.